The 5 men who went to prison for raping the jogger say they've been waiting 9 years for justice. They want compensation, an apology, anything from the city indicating that they were wrongfully convicted. They're still waiting. Our Dean Meminger picks up that part of the story.
Locked up for years, the Central Park Five say they deserve to get paid for their time behind bars.
If your 14-year-old son or daughter went to jail for 8 years, how do you put a value on that?
The value the Central Park Five have put on it in a federal lawsuit, $50 million each for Yusuf Salam, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise, and Antron McCray. They want the city to pay for sending them to prison for a crime another man ultimately admitted to 13 years later. The Five insist that back in 1989, they were bullied by police into making confessions that resulted in their convictions for the brutal rape of a jogger in Central Park.
I think that when a jury takes a look at that, they're going to see that the confessions make no sense when you look at the timeline evidence and the physical evidence. So, you know, they can't have it both ways. They can't say, oh, those confessions were true, except for all the parts of them that were plainly false.
Still, lawyers for the Five are frustrated the city won't just skip a civil trial and negotiate a financial settlement on the lawsuit they filed 8 years ago.
They won't even sit down and have even a preliminary discussion about trying to settle the case.
Attorney Jonathan Moore is confident that if it does come to a trial, the Five will be victorious. When convicted rapist and murderer Matias Reyes finally admitted to the jogger rape, authorities checked and found it was his DNA on her socks, and there was no physical evidence tying the Five to the attack. In 2002, then Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau's office prepared a report that concluded, in hindsight, the Central Park Five confessions were riddled with errors and discrepancies, and that the Five were elsewhere in the park that night. The convictions were tossed, but lawyers for the Five charged the cops and the DA knew all along the confessions had been coerced and that they deliberately violated the civil rights of the 5 young Black and Latino men to satisfy public outrage over the crime against a white woman.
What we have here, we believe, is a deliberate effort to frame these young men.
But the city's law department, which declined to put anyone on camera for this report, says the city is colorblind and the men don't deserve to be paid. The law department suggests the men did take part in the attack, even if there's no DNA evidence to prove it. It says the criminal case is one matter, the civil case another. Quote, "This trial is actually not about whether the Five are innocent. Rather, it's about whether the police and prosecutors coerced a confession or withheld evidence. They did not." The city goes on to say Black and Latino officers were involved with investigating the crimes that took place in the park in 1989. The city also says it recently paid Blacks and Latinos who were wrongfully imprisoned in other cases. The city provided us with data that shows it settled state cases with a Latino man last year for $7.5 million. He spent 15 years behind bars before his murder conviction was dismissed. After wrongfully spending 14 years in prison for murder, 2 Latino men claimed malicious prosecution and sued for $50 million each. They got a combined settlement for more than $3 million. The city also shelled out $340,000 to a Black man after he wrongfully served 17 months in jail on murder charges. Since 1985, the State Court of Claims has resolved 267 wrongful conviction cases. 185 were dismissed. Just 50 resulted in awards or settlements, and 32 cases were still pending as of March 2009. Federal cases like the Central Park Fives are a little different, but Alan Newton says it's not easy. He spent 22 years in prison before DNA cleared him of rape and assault. A federal jury awarded him $18.5 million, but a judge tossed out the entire award, saying the city didn't intentionally violate his rights.
We always believed the city may have taken it to the next step and appealed the judgment anyway, but it was my belief that, I was awarded this judgment and things would be able to move forward from here. The last thing I believed that this judgment was going to be, the rug was going to be pulled from under our feet.
The Central Park Five say if they have to go through another trial, it will open up old wounds, not just for them, but for the jogger and for the entire city. For now, it appears there could be some new scars as both sides prepare for a battle in federal court.
New York One repeatedly reached out to the New York City Law Department, asking them to provide someone on camera to explain their position. They were unable to do so because they feared jeopardizing the upcoming civil trial. However, they did provide statements and reports that indicate in their view that Matias Reyes's confession was far from accurate. And they also say the 5 teens who went to prison for raping the jogger are far from innocent. Raymond Santana was behind bars in 2002 when he heard that Matias Reyes, who was serving a life sentence for murder and rape, confessed to the crime that Santana was doing time for.
The proof is in the pudding. Read the paperwork. DNA evidence has cleared us. You know, when you don't have any blood, any semen, any mud, any footprints, any fingerprints, any hair samples, that says it all. What more needs to be said?
Well, the city has a lot to say about the Central Park 5 and the Reyes confession. As it prepares to defend itself in the civil case filed by the Central Park 5, the city is citing the so-called Armstrong report, which was prepared for the police commissioner in 2003 after their convictions were vacated by a judge. The report postulates that, quote, it may have been, as a former inmate's acquaintance claimed Reyes told him, that the attack on the jogger was already in progress when Reyes joined, attracted to the scene by the jogger's screams. Or the defendants might have abandoned the jogger after mauling her in the hit-and-run style typical of their rampage, and Reyes could have then come upon her and perpetuated a new attack, but in a much more brutal fashion. But in the Manhattan District Attorney's 2002 motion to vacate the convictions of the Central Park 5, Assistant DA Nancy Ryan concluded, quote, DNA tests show that Matias Reyes's claim that he raped the jogger was true and confirmed that no one else's DNA was present in the samples taken from the victim or the evidence at the scene. Ryan's investigation also found that, quote, Reyes picked up the stick, came up behind her and struck a heavy blow to the back of her head with a heavy branch is consistent and explanatory of medical and crime scene evidence. But the city's law department says, quote, Reyes's claim that he acted alone makes no sense. He made many varied statements which changed over time, and many of his claims are implausible. For example, he claims to have followed the victim, a trained runner who ran faster than an 8-minute mile, zigzagging from one side of the path to another while holding a heavy branch with both hands. It would have been virtually impossible for someone to overtake the jogger under these circumstances.
The city is fighting it so much, so powerfully, you know, digging in at each step, and that it's been 8 years, I think, is very difficult for them. It feels like an incredibly long time. And it is an incredibly long time, and I think it also puts their lives on hold.
22 years later, the Central Park 5 say their lives have been ruined, and they're struggling to piece things back together.
I went in at 14, and I came out, I was 22. You know, so I really had to adjust to my environment. Man, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
They feel that they did nothing wrong. You did a whole lot wrong. You took an innocent baby off the streets.
I don't know what childhood is like. I don't know what being a teenager is like. I don't know what being a young adult is like, because I didn't grow up in the traditional way.
I think that when people rush to find a conclusion, that's where you make all your mistakes. So, you know, when you hear about cases now where somebody confess, I'm not quick to judge. I just let it play out, and the truth will come out eventually. Sometimes it takes 22 years. But it'll come out.
It could be months, perhaps even another year before the civil case goes to trial. Few are looking forward to reopening old wounds that inflamed racial hostilities. But the Central Park 5 again say that they want compensation and an apology from the city of New York. It's not clear that they'll get either one. Thanks for watching.